So we could keep that up until 6, right?
a trade unionist, came forth to call for a march on Washington, asking for an end to Jim Crow laws, equal access to public education, and civil rights legislation that would change the face of a nation. Today we come before you, walking on the road to jobs, the road to peace, the road to justice, paved with the blood, the sweat, the tears of labor movement people from around the nation. And today, I come to you as a young person, as a young woman, as a young Black woman, to ask you to use us, use the young people of the United States of America to pave a road that will last forever, pave a road that will let us become the foot soldiers, let us not have to do this again for our children. We ask you to let us come forth with you, not behind you, not in front of you, but together on that road to jobs, justice, and peace.
Welcome, and thank you for attending this important discussion about the 2022 midterm elections. My name is Marquita Johnson. I am the Director of Membership Services at UFCW 3000 under the leadership of President Faye Gunther and Secretary Treasurer Joe Mizrahi. I am also an executive member of the Minority Coalition Committee under the leadership of President Max Bruni and President Emeritus Don Cash. As many of you know, the Minority Coalition is one of our four constituency groups within the UFCW. Our mission is to develop a unified voice and promote diversity and inclusion within the UFCW and the labor movement. The leaders and organizers who belong to the coalition are committed to growing the ranks of the UFCW while at the same time holding the union accountable to its commitment to diversity and inclusion as a fundamental key to growth. The coalition provides training and educational programs to help raise awareness regarding issues that affect the Black community while on the front lines of current civil rights battles like voter suppression efforts that threaten to disenfranchise thousands of voters at polls. So thank you again for joining us. This year, voters decide who has the majority in both chambers of Congress. In 2022, that means that candidate voters choose in the November 8 midterm elections will determine to a large degree whether President Joe Biden can get any new policies passed or if Republicans will gain the ability to block most things he wants to do. With the current political climate, we felt it necessary to have a discussion about the approaching midterm elections. These elections are more important than ever, considering the Democrats are defending razor-thin majorities in Congress, meaning 1/3 of the Senate. The entire House is up for grabs this fall. Not to mention the conservative-leaning Supreme Court recently striking down abortion as constitutional right. It isn't a stretch to say this is a very tumultuous time for the country and we need voters mobilized. All 434 seats in the House of Representatives are on the ballot, as well as 35 Senate seats. Democrats currently hold a 9-seat majority in the House. It takes 218 seats to control the chamber. The vast majority of races are considered safe for both parties, which means about 3 dozen districts are a toss-up and will decide who runs things. The midterms won't just decide which party controls Congress, as there are governor races in 36 states this year. UFCW is dedicated to supporting workers' rights, with voter rights under attack and voter suppression tactics at an all-time high. We felt it necessary to get our members informed, to mobilize and vote. We have an exciting agenda planned for you tonight, which will include dynamic speakers and a panelist discussion. We will be joined by Stacey Abrams, the House Minority Leader for the Georgia General Assembly and State Representative for the 89th House District. Ademola Oyes-Peso, he is the UFCW International Vice President and Director of Legislative and Political Action. Jessica Knight Henry, Deputy Executive Director of Democratic Senate Campaign Committee. Carolyn Lopez, the National Voting Rights Director for American Votes. We will also hear a video address from US Senator Raphael Warnock. So let's get started with our first speaker. Stacey Abrams is she's a politician, a lawyer, voting rights activist, and an author who served in the Georgia House of Representatives from 2007 to 2017, serving as the Democratic Minority Leader from 2011 to 2017. In 2018, she founded Fair Fight Action, an organization to address voter suppression. As a voter rights activist, her efforts have been widely credited with boosting voter turnout in Georgia, including in the 2020 president election when Joe Biden narrowly won the state, and in Georgia's 2020 to 2021 regularly scheduled and special US Senate elections, which gave Democrats control of the Senate. Abrams was the Democratic nominee in the 2018 Georgia gubernatorial elections, becoming the first African-American female major party gubernatorial nominee in the United States. She lost the election to Republican candidate Brian Kemp. However, on December 1st, 2021, she announced she would run for governor again in the 2022 Georgia gubernatorial election and became the Democratic nominee for this year's midterm elections after running unopposed. Abrams is an author of both fiction and nonfiction books, such as Our Time Is Now and Lead from the Outside, which both were New York Times bestsellers. At this time, we welcome Stacey Abrams.
Well, Marquita, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all. Let's see. Not sure you guys can hear me.
Yes.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone. It is my honor to be with you. I'm in a car. I'm down in Macon, Georgia. I'm here because we are having a rally in a few minutes, but I wanted to make sure I took time to come and say hello and say thank you. This is an extraordinary year. It is a difficult year, but it is amazing because of how much opportunity is embedded in this year. In 2020, we saw the nation change when we elected Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And because we're Georgians, because we're Southern, we sent you Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff. But what we also were able to make possible is the extraordinary investment we have seen across this country. Monies that have flowed into communities that have been cut off from opportunity, left out of access, and denied real privilege. But we know that not every dollar has made it to the people who need it the most. We know that essential workers were treated as anything but essential during COVID. We know that governors like Brian Kemp passed laws not to protect our essential workers, but to protect the companies that were denying them access to protection. But we also know that we are not going to stop. I'm running for governor again because my parents raised me to do what's right and to fight for what I believe. And I believe that we need to get back to the fundamentals, investing in education, in healthcare, in housing, investing in making sure that you can make a good living whether you work for yourself or someone else. And we need a governor who believes that. I know this year matters because we have already watched the evisceration of so many of our rights. In 2013, the elimination, essentially the gutting of the Voting Rights Act with the Shelby decision. In 2021 and 22, we watched further erosions of our voting rights. And in 22, with the Dobbs decision, we saw a loss of bodily autonomy and the beginning of eliminating the right to privacy in the United States. When those decisions are sent down to the states, we have got to pay attention, because this isn't an accident. This is a systematic plan to rob us of our rights by returning to the sinister practice of states' rights. When the state gets to decide whether your constitutional rights are real, we are in deep trouble. We are the United States of America. And that is why I'm so proud of the work that you all are doing, both locally here in Georgia and around the country, because we are in this together. We rise together, we run together, and we win together. You're going to hear a lot of things about what the polls say and don't say, but I will tell you this. We know we are tied and in the margin of error, and we know that we've got the wind at our backs because of the horrific decision that Brian Kemp made to eliminate access to the right to abortion, because we are losing our 6th hospital in Georgia in a matter of weeks, because we are losing a level 1 trauma center, and his answer is to add a few beds to an overcrowded hospital. We know that lives are on the line. As governor, I plan to expand access to Medicaid. I intend to restore women's right to choose. I plan to invest in our teachers and our children, to tackle gun violence, not by weakening our laws, but by protecting our people. And we can do all of those things by electing the governor who sees Georgia and serves Georgia. But as you think about what is at stake, as you make those phone calls and knock those doors, as you invest in candidates across the country, remember that governors are the most important jobs that most people don't understand. It was a governor in Florida who passed and signed Stand Your Ground law. It was a governor in Wisconsin that eviscerated the social safety net. It was a governor in Wisconsin that tried to strip the state of their access to union rights. It was a governor who started mass incarceration with the 3 strikes you're outlaw. And it was governors who passed Jim Crow. It never had a single federal law. Governors make a difference. And in this day and age, governors are the difference between success and failure, between progress and regress. And it's the difference that we can make in November. So thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for always standing on the side of right. Thank you for always standing up for those who don't know they have the right to do so. And thank you for being who you are. It is my honor to be with you, even in this car as we sit in Macon, but know that I'm with you in spirit every day. Take care.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but after hearing that, I am fired up. Thank you so much, Stacey Abrams, and good luck today. So let's start. Let's begin with our panel discussion. Adamola, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Adamola Oyefeso. I am the International Vice President and Director of the UFCW's Legislative and Political Action Department. It's a pleasure to be here with everybody. And I think, okay, I'm going to share my screen very quickly. If you give me one moment. All right. Excuse me, sorry. The joys of technology. All right, so in a moment, you'll hear from the Deputy Executive Director of the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee, who will tell us about her upcoming races. And you'll hear from our friend from Carolina of America Votes, who will talk to you about the voting rights challenges that are occurring across the nation. But first, I want to give you a brief roundup of the work that UFCW is doing currently and with our members and with the general community. And as you can see in this slide, it entails working with our members and talking to our members at their work sites, door to door, with phone banking, and engaging them and their families as activists to get them to talk to their friends, loved ones, and their entire community. This program began earlier than normal. We started with a small cadre of people, of members, that we pulled out to do political work in July of this year. We held a training with all of these members in Minnesota where we brought them together, talked to them about what it would take to do this work, and made them leaders of their own team in all the different states. We're currently in Georgia, helping Stacey run her election and trying to help reelect Senator Raphael Warnock. And we're also currently in the states of Arizona, Pennsylvania, Maryland, we'll be in Massachusetts, Minnesota, Colorado, and Wisconsin. And all of these states have either governor's races, Senate races, and many congressional races. So we have members currently working, knocking on UFCW doors, and also working with the AFL-CIO, knocking on labor doors. But that's not where we stopped. We are also working to have a robust digital ad program where we are highlighting and engaging our members through digital communications. Some of you may have seen it if you're in those states, where we're talking to people, getting them, reminding them to register to vote. That was the first piece, making sure all of our members were registered. We've so far registered over 1,000 new members, over 1,000 members as new voters. And we're also making sure people are requesting their mail-in ballots. A lot of states have mail-in ballot option, and we want to make sure people are early voting. So these digital ads will run on those two issues until early vote begins, and through early vote, reminding people to vote. But we don't stop there with our digital communication. Our digital communication then extends to teaching members about issues. And these issues range from the American Rescue Plan and in some case where people got the stimulus check. We want to make sure people are aware of who got it for them and who didn't fight for them. And we're also fighting for reminding people about all the safety components that occurred during all of this. So we're doing that in digital, but then we're also sending mail, because we know a lot of people, while they're on their phone, they still receive regular mail. And we have a robust mail program where we're having members receive mail that shows a comparison. We're not just telling our members what to do. We're helping them to make up their own decision about who's better for them. So these mail pieces entail side-by-side comparisons of all candidates running, Democratic and Republican, and we tell them where they stand on the issues they care about. And those are going out there, depending on the race, you're getting 2, 3, and a fourth piece reminding you to actually go vote and who we think you should support. And then we're also holding virtual events similar to this, where with Stacey, we'll be doing one in Georgia with Stacey, where we'll have her talk directly to the members of the UFCW locals in state. And these are where members and local leadership are asking these elected officials questions that matter to our members in these states. We're doing this all around the country. We'll be doing it in Nevada with Senator Masto. We'll be doing it in Pennsylvania with Josh Shapiro and John Fetterman. So we're making sure our members are feeling engaged and are part of the process. And one of the things that I really enjoy is we do candidate and member organizer soapboxes. So a soapbox is a feature where we ask like a man on the street question, and why are you supporting Raphael Warnock? Or what's the issue that makes you want to turn out and vote this year? And members respond. And then we put those as ads where we push it out to people. We push it out to the membership. In 2020, we had an ad done by a member, African-American member, where he talked about the importance of the election as an African-American man during all the things that were going on during 2020. This ad, when we first put it up, ended up performing where about 60,000 different UFCW members commented on it. Not only saw it, but actually made comments, liked it, and it was a hit. It was surprising, but what we learned is when our members talk to one another, they listen, and the engagement on these types of projects are really high. So that is what our program is, but our program is nothing without our friends in helping us fight for voter protections at America Votes. And our friends at the DSCC working to help fund all the Senate elections that are important around the country. So I want to pass it back to you, Marquita, or should I pass it to Carolina? Carolina?
Happy Thursday, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you all. I'm equally fired up, and I'm so amazed by all the work that you're doing. I would be remiss if I didn't say, well, one quick hello. Carolina Lopez, National Voting Rights Director with America Votes. America Votes is a progressive coordination hub throughout the US. And in my role as a former election official and elections and voting rights advocate, I have the distinct pleasure of, if you go to the next slide, I have the distinct pleasure of working with national and in-state groups, labor groups, voting rights groups, returning citizen groups, immigration, all these wonderful groups doing amazing work to educate the community and expand access to the ballot box. And so just wanted to give you a little feeler of like what the things that we're working on. One, we are tracking legislation because laws change all the time. I'm going to give you a little preview as to like what's different for a voter this year versus like maybe the last time that they tried to vote for a governor's race, right? So like what's different, tracking the changes, trying to stop bad changes or things that take away access to voting, try to promote good things. So that's one bucket of work. The second bucket of work is, well, once the bills are all resolved, the administration of elections varies greatly. In the chat, could you all tell me like what states you all live in currently? I live in Florida, for instance, and so in Florida we have 67 counties, and that means that there's 67 election officials. In Wisconsin, there's 1,852 cities. That's 1,852 ways of doing elections. So if you follow the drift here, election administration really is, I'm here in New York, right? Like you guys have like huge, you have huge populations, but also there's been recent changes, right? And so part of what we're trying to do is, trying to get ahead of it. Like, how are you implementing it? Can you expand early voting? Can you mail ballots as soon as possible so voters have ballots in their hand, as many days as possible? And then, are you notifying voters? How are you notifying them? Are you waiting 10 days to let Carolina know that she didn't sign her ballot? Or am I getting a text, an email, and a phone call the moment that they figure out, hey, Carolina didn't sign her ballot, right? Like, so those are things that are completely under control of the local election administrator. And we're building those relationships. And last but not least, voter protection. And this is where, we've done everything we can. We've tried to fix the laws. We tried to make sure that the local election administrators have the voters' interests at heart. And now it's, how do we get someone much like you, your neighbors, your friends, your union members who show up to vote? How do we make sure that you get to vote the first time you show up to vote, right? I can't tell you how many times in the past people will wait a couple of hours to vote, and then they're like, oh, Carolina, we can't find you on the voter rolls. If you send me home, or if you send me to another voting location, there's going to be a point where I'm going to say, I got to go back to work. I don't have time for this. I got to go pick up my kids. You know what? I'm just not going to vote, right? And so we're trying to work there. And I have some ways that you can help with us to make sure that people are allowed to vote the first time that they attempt to vote. All right, let's go to the next slide. We are 47 days away from the election. And so I just really wanted to give you like a very high level understanding of like what's happening. So I see New York. What about everybody else? Where are you joining us today from? What state or what city or what county? You know, mail ballots, if you are overseas, military, those ballots go out this Saturday. Voting is actually already happening in North Carolina. Iowa is getting ready to open early voting pretty soon. Domestic mail ballots go out between late September and mid-October, depending on where you live. So we are in the thick of it. How you are able to vote changes by state. Some states allow you to register up until the date of the election. Others, you have to, register X number of days before. In some states, you could vote by mail, no excuse, just because you want to. In other states, you have to provide an excuse. I'm ill, I'm at the hospital, I'm going to be out of the country, things like that. So it's really important to know the rules. And that's why I keep asking, like, tell me where you're from, because then I can make sure I can tell you what you need to know to educate your community. And fortunately or unfortunately, there are changes, since the 2020 general election, the last presidential election, there's been changes. I'm happy to report that in some states, we have more options to vote today than we did back in 2018. And we're going to talk about those. And in other states, just voting has been more restricted. You heard Leader Abrams, Georgia is one of them. So just wanted to give you a quick rundown. If you go to the next slide, here's just a quick example of where, at the end of 2021, so a whole year after the last presidential, the blue marks, the blue states are places where, that we got more voting. For instance, in Pennsylvania, while it's grayed out, a big thing that happened was Act 77. And all that really means is that you can now request a mail ballot if you want to. In other states like Florida and Georgia, Texas, Arizona, these are the ones you hear in the news. These are the ones that, forgive me, that voting has gone a little harder. Fast forward another 9 months, go to the next slide. Even more changes. And you see Florida and Georgia, that means that they got bills, and Arizona, that means that they got bills 2 years in a row that affect elections. So a quick rundown of like basic changes, right? In Arizona, they have, next slide. In Arizona, they're making it harder for you to stay on the ballot, on the mail ballot list. They're making it harder for you to cure your ballot. If you're in Colorado, good news, you now feel a little bit more protected. They've banned somebody from having a gun within 100 feet of a voting location. In Florida, although they've been trying to change immensely the laws, voting rights groups have worked really hard to make sure that the experience for the voter didn't change all that much. So I'm happy to say that for this year, the only major change for voters is if you're going to request a mail ballot, you have to provide your driver's license or the last four of your social. They're a little bit more picky about whose ballot you can return. So if you're voting in Florida, I would just say don't touch somebody else's ballot. That's just my honest opinion. And now we have a new elections police unit, which we're monitoring. Georgia, lots of changes. The short end is that you have a shorter time frame to request a mail ballot, and the local GBI, the local state, has more power over elections. That is something that we're certainly monitoring. In Maine, actually really good things. They have new online voter registration system, and all the changes that they did to make mail ballot accessible during COVID, they actually codified it, and now it's part of their code. In Michigan, same thing. Voting got easier. They passed Prop 3, which is a ballot measure back in 2018. And so now if you're on the permanent absentee ballot file, you automatically get a mail ballot application every time. So that's less things that you have to remember. In Minnesota, we're waiting on how they implement drop boxes, but it's feeling really hopeful. Next slide. In Nevada, oh my God, so many good things happened in 2021. Now we have a statewide vote by mail system. We have more agencies that can automatically register people, straight ticket voting. New Hampshire, not a lot of changes except that if you show up without ID, now there's like a different path for you. North Carolina, huge. Now if you're a returning citizen, you've served your time, you're no longer under probation, you can vote now in North Carolina, and that is huge. In Ohio, the ballot looks a little different. So, it's just trying to get people comfortable with the new ballot layout. And some of the races for court now have, whether you're a rep, Dem, nonpartisan, and that's new. Pennsylvania, thanks to Act 77, we now have the ability to request a mail ballot just because. And unfortunately, in Wisconsin, in the last 3-4 months, they have really, and when I say they, I mean the legislature, the Republican-controlled legislature, the Republican-controlled Supreme Court, have worked overtime to outlaw no more drop boxes, no more ballot harvesting, no more ballot cure. So if you didn't sign your ballot or your signature didn't match, there's no way to cure it. And basic information. So it used to be back in the day, Carolina could put my address, Milwaukee 12345 zip code. And if I forgot Wisconsin, that would be okay. Now, if I don't put the state, that ballot is null. So why am I sharing this with you? Because it's important, right? It's important that we know what's happening, what are the new requirements, so that way we can help our peers, ourselves, right? To make sure our vote is counted. Next slide. So how are we helping at America Votes? One, we have a dashboard, and it's probably TMI, but I'm going to share it anyway. This is pretty much all the rules, all the do's and don'ts of election administration, and I'm putting it in the chat. It tells you what are the rules for registering to vote. Can I register my 17-year-old son? Depends on the state. How can I vote? Etc. We are also plugged in with national election protection efforts. So there is groups that, are recruiting poll monitors, poll workers, so on and so forth. And ultimately, our role is just to make sure that the precinct is open, that it has enough people, and that the voter can, easily access their voting location. We're also, working with election officials to, to make sure to help recruit poll worker shortages. And ultimately, we are monitoring in case that there's political violence or, misinformation, such as if there were to be a sign that said election canceled. Well, that would certainly be a problem, right? Next slide. So here's my pitch to you. We can either get really upset or get really discouraged, or, and this is how I'm choosing to treat this, we can band together, make sure that we have, that we're informed, that we are registered, that our information is accurate, the voter rolls, that all of our, everybody in our network is plugged in. And most importantly, we need boots on the ground. And what that means is we need eyes and ears. We need eyes and ears at as many early voting and election day voting locations. And so, if there's an opportunity for you to get involved in your state, this would be super, super helpful, to make sure that we know what's happening real time. There's a difference between us having a roundtable a week after the election and Alma or Anthony or Brian say, oh yeah, I didn't get to vote because there was a bomb threat. And so I just couldn't wait. I had to go. A week later, I can't do anything about it. But if we know about it real time, we can get the precinct up and running. We can extend the voting hours. We could do things if we know early enough. And so that's the benefit of being plugged in. And so the last thing I'll say, next slide, is most people don't know what to do if they have a problem. Somebody turned them away, somebody was harassing them, somebody was obnoxious to them when they were trying to vote, and they don't know what to do with it. And like I said, I hear about it a month later and I can't help you. But if you tell me now, can help you. So I'm going to share a toolkit, which includes an 866 R vote. It's a national line for election protection. It's staffed whether you're in California or New York or Washington State or New Jersey. There's a Spanish version, an AAPI version, an Arabic version. And here's what you could do for me today. You could put that on your social media. You could share it with your union membership. You could share it at your church. You could share it on your social media, on your website, on your e-blast. You'd be surprised how many people are just not aware that, you know, this helpline exists and it's filled with election experts and lawyers and everything in between. So if you have capacity, I, you know, would love that. And I'm wondering, does anybody have any questions? I'm super humbled by the opportunity to join you all today. I realize this is a lot of information, but I want you to feel super comfortable that there's many of us in the coalition space following rules to make sure you're covered and that your union membership can vote. And that's, I'm looking at you, Alabama and Georgia too, right? So thank you for the opportunity. I'll leave you the link to the election protection hotline, and I look forward to seeing you at a voting location near you.
Thank you, Carolina. Our next speaker is Jessica Knight-Henry.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me this evening. I'm Jessica Knight-Henry. I am the Deputy Executive Director and Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the DSCC, Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee. And as you know, in this midterm election, maintaining the balance of the Senate is so important. So I'm going to walk you through a quick deck that we have here to talk about some of the trends, talk about some of our races, and just really what we've been doing over at the DSCC to really prepare and put ourselves in the best position to win. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see that there are a couple trends here that we've seen, and this has been really over the course of the cycle, but has really popped in the last few weeks post-Labor Day. Our incumbents have been extremely resilient despite this tough environment. I know you hear over and over and over again, just, and I don't have to tell you all, just what folks are up against. And with inflation at an all-time high, people really feeling it in their pocketbooks, that we've seen the president's numbers really dip below. But what we know is that our incumbents have really maintained a level of approval that has had them above water this entire time. And so that is something that, despite all of the things that we're seeing and hearing, is really promising going into this final stretch. The next piece is that we've seen just a myriad of flawed Republican candidates, a lot of damaging vulnerabilities. They came, for each other's jugulars during those primaries. And this really turned off a lot of voters. A lot of the divisiveness that we've seen over the course of the previous administration continue to just permeate throughout the Republican primaries. And they've really had to trend much further to the right. And what that means is that it's given us an opportunity to really pose contrast, where we have strong Democratic challengers who have proven track records in their respective states, and really are showing just how different they are in comparison to their Republican nominee counterparts. So with those trends, if we go to the next slide and the one after, we quickly can show how we win. I think we might. And a part of that is really making the case about these flawed Republicans and building that contrast. You'll probably hear me say contrast over and over and over throughout this presentation today, but that's really us making the case. When you look at what they are offering up, what they stand for, what values they have versus our Democrats, we know that we can win that argument. When we talk about the next piece here, it really comes down to fundraising dominance, and we'll go into that a little bit later, but our candidates are experiencing a level of fundraising that is mostly energized by the grassroots, by individuals who are signing up and raising their hands to give it that grassroots level. And we're seeing that energy, which we hope will actually transcend into votes as well, and the energy that we're going to see and need from our base. And then historic investments. We at the DSCC are one of our other main focuses is really building the coordinated campaigns, and in places where we didn't have nominees until very recently, looking at Wisconsin. It was our goal and main motivation to build a turnkey operation so that that our nominees would come in and be able to just hit the ground running. And so we're very proud of that. So if we go in and look at these flawed Republicans very specifically, and how we build that contrast, we continue to see the Republican Party shift more and more to the right. If we look at a state like Arizona, where we had the sitting governor, Doug Ducey, decline to get in that race, and instead they found Blake Masters, who has a history of white supremacy extremism, someone who has been bankrolled by Peter Thiel, a Trump acolyte, all of these things that really continue to make that contrast. I think we look at Pennsylvania. I did not have Dr. Oz on my 2022 bingo card in terms of opponents that we would be up against, but all of those things that he's done, really, being the sort of TV doc that, will sell you a magic pill for just about anything, really gets at his character. And what we've seen is, even during the COVID crisis, him undercutting valuable advice that was being given by Dr. Fauci and others, and having a platform that went against helping Americans and saving lives. Ron Johnson is the most vulnerable Republican that we have this cycle in the state of Wisconsin. And so we know that it goes beyond him just saying crazy things. He has hurt the people of Wisconsin. And so it is about us making the case about why Ron Johnson should not be reelected in that race. And then looking at Ted Budd in North Carolina, again, someone who is very, very extreme, someone that had that race been held when it was originally scheduled in March of this year, would have likely lost. But he's someone that sought out the Trump endorsement, was largely funded by Club for Growth, and his campaign really swung by the time the May primary came around. And what that did was make us really be able to go on the defense in North Carolina, a state that probably wouldn't have made our map without having him as the nominee there. And then Herschel Walker in Georgia. I mean, there are just story after story after story, but what it comes down to is him truly being unfit to serve. And that's in comparison to Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's someone that is been a pillar in the community, someone that has actually delivered for Georgians as a senator, and us continuing to be able to make that case. And then another place where we're able to sort of expand our map is in Ohio, where with the nominee of J.D. Vance as the Republican nominee in that state, has really shifted the ground there and has made Tim Ryan's race really that much more accessible, with an opportunity to have that race come online in a very real way. And the next slide, just last week, we saw in New Hampshire, yet again, another crowded field, but another opportunity for Republicans to really nominate anyone that was a lot more moderate. And what we ended up with was Don Bolduc in New Hampshire. And this was a place where Senator Hassan obviously is someone that is a must protect, we must bring back. But again, this really helps us because he is, again, a Trump person, a MAGA person. You see all these crazy headlines, but a race that I think we are feeling a lot more settled about. And what that means is that we're able to divert resources to other races across the map. And so in comparison to these flawed Republican candidates, we have strong Democrats. Our Democratic challengers in our pickup states, where we've got a real solid opportunity. In North Carolina, Chief Justice Sherry Beasley, the former Chief Justice of the North Carolina Supreme Court, she's someone that has run statewide before, has a proven record, outperformed Joe Biden and our Senate nominee last cycle, and lost that race for her reelection bid by just 401 votes. And what that means is that there is a clear path for Sherry Beasley in the state of North Carolina. John Fetterman, he's, has this tough guy brand. He really is someone that won the Democratic primary in the state of Pennsylvania, by really just having a different brand and proving that a different type of candidate really can resonate with voters. And despite some recent health challenges, is back on the trail, is running a very, very strong campaign. And, whether it's the stuff you see on social media, how they're coming for Dr. Oz, or just how much they're doing to talk to voters in real time and make the case that it really shifts who we can run and how we can win in each of these states. And then on the next slide, looking at a state like Ohio, where I mentioned having a nominee like J.D. Vance, these flawed Republican candidates, really gave us an opportunity where this race is a lot closer than any of us expected it to be, and giving a clear signal that Republicans are having to play defense in this state, a place where they likely hadn't expected to spend money. Part of that reason was retirements that came early, but then we look at the recruitment by the Republicans, and so that's why Tim Ryan has a shot. I mean, he's also running a master class of how to run a campaign. And then another member of Congress that is running a strong campaign in Florida is Congresswoman Val Demings. Again, Marco Rubio is another unpopular Republican senator. We've got a real opportunity. I think this race was one that we were like, oh, it will put Republicans on additional defense, but we're starting to see some tightening in that race as well. And it's so important to have the resources for her to continue to communicate. And then Mandela Barnes in Wisconsin. Like I said, this race is definitely a referendum on Ron Johnson, but we are so excited to have a candidate like Mandela, someone who brings energy that to the base. And it's something that we just haven't seen before. We run a lot of focus groups, do a lot of testing, and it's one of those things where people are able to recite verbatim Mandela's bio. So like all of the ads, all of the things that they're hearing are really cutting through. You hear people say, oh, he's the son of a teacher. He's the son of a third shift worker. All of those things have really, really resonated, particularly with our union families in Wisconsin. And we know that in addition to having a very flawed Republican incumbent, we've got a very exciting nominee, and so are very excited about these challengers. And then our incumbents, they are all outperforming Biden or have won in challenging years, and we see them, really holding their own, defying gravity despite the environment. And what we're seeing, even as we see the president's numbers improve, is that they're really having an opportunity to double down. And having these flawed candidates doesn't hurt. We know they've got a record of accomplishments. We seen these massive fundraising advantages just last quarter. Senator Warnock raising $13 million in the quarter. Again, that all really points to a lot of the energy that we're seeing on the ground. And if you go to the next slide, a lot of this has been bolstered as of late by these legislative victories, whether it's the CHIPS and Science Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Plan, the Inflation Reduction Act, being able to communicate and message and localize these accomplishments in a real way. And then confirming Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson was a real opportunity to get the base back energized. And then we see this record to run on. Like I said, they're localizing these accomplishments. When you look at Warnock being, at the Port of Savannah, talking about the supply chain, talking about capping the cost of insulin. We talk about Senator Cortez Masto, again, bringing these issues back to their state, being able to talk about these wins. And again, this fundraising dominance that we've seen. But I want to sort of couch that with, like, we are seeing a lot more spending come from the bad guys. Our candidates are able to use the money that they are seeing, a lot of this fundraising, a lot that's coming from the grassroots, to be able to deliver their message, and having our candidates talk about themselves in that positive bio, those positive tracks, is very, very important. Whereas we see a lot of this outside spending coming in with groups that we know are there just to do the attacking. And so making sure that we have that money and that energy. And then if you look at the next slide, as we talk about what these historic investments have meant, is that we were able to go into the field early. We have, I think we're on the next slide as well. So our historic investments, we're able to be in the field earlier. Our ground game started earlier than ever, with coordinated campaigns launching in May and June of last year, where we had voter protection efforts on the ground earlier than ever. We announced last year a $30 million investment. We just expanded that to $46 million across our key battleground states. And also our voter protection program, which is Defend the Vote, where we announced $10 million. And I know Carolina spoke a lot about those efforts, but a lot of it really goes to educating voters on what's changed, what's different, making sure that we were able to put folks on the ground to really build relationships, whether that's with local election officials or whether it's through our coalitions programming, so that in our constituency communities, that it's not transactional. We're not just there the last part of the race to ask for a vote, but we're really building up a relationship in those communities. And what we've seen is that these goals of these programs, we were able to really help anticipate our volunteer capacity. We were able to communicate to communities of color and build that engagement, and really start to recruit and build the leadership that is needed on the ground. And so when we shift and talk about what comes next, it's really, what do we need to do in this final stretch? And a lot of that is for you, obviously, to know more about our candidates, to be able to tell your friends and family about our candidates and why they should vote for Democrats. But we need your support. We're seeing a critical opportunity to really, see where these budget gaps are, where we have an opportunity to continue to communicate our message. And what we know is that because this is a midterm election where only a third of the chamber is up, we have an opportunity to win, because it's very different than other midterms where we've seen all of these trends where the House and the Senate are lost based on who is in charge. But we're seeing Democrats deliver, and that message is really cutting through at the exact right moment. So I think that's everything in the deck today. And so would love to turn it over to see if there are any questions. And again, thank you so much for having me on. We know the balance of the Senate is so critical to not only being able to get more things done, but to President Biden's legacy as well, by making sure that we have a stopgap.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Now we are going to hear a video message from Congresswoman Nikema Williams, who has been a fierce advocate for social justice, women, and families throughout her political and professional career. As a member of Congress, Congresswoman Williams continues to uplift the legacy of her mentor and predecessor, Congressman John Lewis, by fighting to prevent voter suppression and expand free and fair access to the ballot box. She always centers the voices of those who are most marginalized. She brings this concern to Congress, having seen firsthand how women and people of color continue to fight for racial and social justice in our country. Marshall, we can go ahead and start that video.
Hello, everyone. I'm Congresswoman Nikema Williams, and I'm proud to represent Georgia's 5th Congressional District. And I also have the honor to serve as the chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Georgia. I'm also a proud member of the UFCW family. Before I got into politics, I was the cashier at Food World, my local grocery store at home in Alabama. Y'all, I'm never more grateful and more fired up than when I'm with my brothers and sisters in labor. So thank you to President Emeritus Dunn Cash, President Max Bruni, and Vice President Sandra Williams for having me, or as I call her, Auntie Sandra, and for everything that y'all do for the labor movement in our state. Y'all, I wouldn't be in Congress today if it were not for the support of organized labor, and I remember that every single day. Working families are my guiding light in Congress. Every initiative I learn about, every project that I take on, I ask myself, will this truly help the people, the working people of my district? I'm proud of all that this Democratic Congress has accomplished for workers in the middle class. Y'all, this is a Congress and an administration truly focused on building our economy from the bottom up and middle out. And unions, y'all are at the forefront of that agenda. Democrats in Washington have passed transformational legislation for working families across the country. Democrats passed the bipartisan infrastructure law, delivering on promises to revitalize our roads, bridges, and highways, creating thousands of good-paying union jobs in construction and manufacturing. Democrats passed the Inflation Reduction Act, delivering on promises to lower costs for working people while combating climate change, creating even more good-paying jobs in the clean energy sector. This is transformational progress that will boost our economy and strengthen our workforce, and it wouldn't have been possible without the labor movement's advocacy and votes. And y'all, we're not done fighting to expand access to healthcare, lower costs, strengthen voting rights, boost wages, and yep, protect the right to organize. But we have an election year ahead of us. And y'all, we need to win to get all of that done. We're gearing up for the election of a lifetime, and we need organized labor support. Never has the power of the labor movement been clearer and stronger. 22 months ago, organized labor delivered Georgia's 16 electoral college votes for President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And 20 months ago, it was organized labor who got out the vote and came back out to the polls again to send John Ossoff to the U.S. Senate and Raphael Warnock to join him, cementing the Democratic pro-worker Senate majority. Y'all did that. Y'all canvassed neighborhoods, y'all knocked on doors, y'all got out in your communities, and you changed the trajectory of the state and this country forever. Y'all made history. And over the past 20 months, we've seen the fruits of our labor. But we're not done yet. We still have so much progress to make. And it starts with going back to the ballot box this fall to elect pro-worker, pro-union Democrats. We must re-elect Reverend Raphael Warnock, who cast the crucial deciding vote in Congress to bring thousands of union jobs right here back home. We've got to finally elect a pro-worker, pro-union Democrat to lead the state of Georgia, my friend Stacey Abrams. We need to get out the vote for Democrats up and down the ballot, like our nominee for Labor Commissioner, William Bodie. A vote for Democrats is a vote for unions. It's a vote for working families. It's a vote for the middle class. We need to make sure that our neighbors and our communities understand what's at stake. Y'all, Election Day is 48 days away, but voters can start casting their ballots in under a month. It's time to kick things into high gear for Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock, for Stacey Abrams, and for every single pro-union Democrat on the ticket. We can't afford for anyone to sit on the sidelines. This election is too important. And
Sorry. Our next video message is from, we'll be hearing from U.S. Senator Raphael G. Warnock of Georgia. He is a pastor and politician serving as the first Black senator from Georgia and the first Black Democrat in the Senate from the South. Senator Raphael Warnock is running for re-election this year to secure a full term after he unseated and appointed Republican in a 2020 special election. Warnock, along with fellow Georgia Senator John Ossoff, helped the Democrats win control of the Senate in an election cycle that saw the state flip blue for Joe Biden. Warnock also serves as the senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the storied Atlantic congregation where John Lewis worshiped and where both Martin Luther King Jr. and Sr. were pastors. Warnock came to prominence in Georgia politics as a leader activist in the campaign to expand Medicaid in the state under the Affordable Care Act. Warnock faces a tight race in the November general election against former football star Herschel Walker, who has the support of former President Donald Trump. Once again, Senator Warnock's election could decide the balance of power in the Senate and could help determine the country's very tenure and direction for a generation to come. Currently, Senator Warnock serves on the Agriculture, Nutrition, and Forestry Committee, Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee, Commerce, Science and Transportation Committee, as well as a special committee on aging and the Joint Economic Committee. We will start the video now.
Members of the UFCW Minority Coalition, thank you so very much for giving me the great honor of speaking to such tireless advocates of workers and their civil rights. I believe in the dignity of work. Now, a lot of folks say they believe in the dignity of work, but it seems to me that if you believe in the dignity of work, you ought to also believe in the dignity of workers. You ought to believe and act as if you understand that people who work hard ought to participate in the prosperity that they create for others. And so I just wanted to drop by to say thank you. Thank you so very much for being on the front lines. Thank you for keeping our economy strong. Every single day, you do the hard work of lifting up the voices of those who are too often left out of vital conversations about our families and about our futures. I know working families are feeling the pinch right now as we're dealing with rising costs. That's why I remain laser focused on Georgia's hard-working families, working hard every single day to lower the costs for the people who make our economy strong. For months, I have led the charge to suspend the federal gas tax. Now, I started calling for this in February. Finally, the president has heard me and has expressed support for my bill to provide relief at the pump. But here's the thing, I know that alone won't do it. That's why I'm fighting also to hold corporations accountable. Because while we've been paying record prices at the pump, they've been enjoying record profits. We've got to hold them accountable. Because while corporations are engaged in this kind of price gouging, you're seeing the effect of it not only at the pump, but also at the pharmacy counter. That's why I also fought for months to cap the cost of prescription drugs. And I'm so grateful my legislation to do this became law as part of the Inflation Reduction Act. Think about it, in one fell swoop, we made sure our seniors no longer have to choose between buying groceries and buying the medicines that they need. And we finally capped the cost of insulin for folks on Medicare to no more than $35 per month of out-of-pocket costs. And if you send me back to the United States Senate, you have my promise that I'll keep fighting, I'll keep pushing, I'll keep making the case until we cap the cost of insulin for everyone who relies on it. Since I got to the Senate, I have also been fighting really hard to pass the PRO Act. This bill will give every worker in America the right to freely organize, to improve their pay and their working conditions, a right all workers deserve. Part of fighting for the dignity of work is ensuring that all workers have access to the ballot. That's why I will continue to fight for voting rights legislation so every eligible voter can be heard. I am so grateful for the work you do to register voters. Voting this November is a chance for Georgians to have a voice in their own democracy. These past 2 years, we have witnessed the incredible sacrifices made by workers like you. In the midst of the pandemic, a word emerged. At least it was a phrase in our lexicon that I had not heard before. In the midst of the pandemic, all of a sudden folks were talking about essential workers. Now, you were essential long before the pandemic brought this into sharp focus. This should have been obvious before. As workers risked their lives in retail and home sales, in department and grocery stores, in hospitals and in nursing homes, the folks who did not have the privilege of sheltering in and had to go out so that the economy could keep moving and we could get goods and services that we all need. Well, here's the thing, if people are essential workers, pay them an essential wage, give them essential benefits, give them an essential voice. Election day is right around the corner. This year, it's more important than ever that we vote early. We got to remind our friends, our family, our neighbors. Early voting begins October 17th. Put that date in your mind, put it in your calendar, October 17th. We've got to remind Georgia voters to vote early so that we win this election. We've got to get ready to knock those doors, make those phone calls, text those friends. You know, the ones who need an extra reminder or two. We've got to get out the vote. When we show up, we win. We're going to need all hands on deck. Together, we're going to bring this home one more time for our workers and for hardworking families all across Georgia. Thank you so much. Keep the faith and keep moving.
As we're wrapping up, I'd like to give a chance to the panelists to give any final remarks. Ademola, you're muted.
I know, I should know how to work this. But thank you so much, Marquita. I just want to let everyone know you've heard from all the speakers and especially Senator Warnock about making sure you turn out and vote. And I saw Tanya in the chat talk about she's working right now in Georgia. Thank you, Tanya, for that. But for everyone, there is an opportunity no matter what state you are in to help in all of these important elections. The Legislative and Political Action Department will be working with the Minority Coalition to set up text banks and phone banks to reach out to all of these crucial races. So when you see the sign up for that come up, please sign up. We need, the way we won in 2020 was by all of us in every state, whether it was New York, California, talking to people in all of these battleground states. So I urge all of you to join us, join the Minority Coalition and the Legislative Political Action Department in reaching out to our members in all of these states. I'll turn it back to you, Marquita.
Thank you, Ademola. With less than 2 months to go, there is a lot of certainty surrounding the midterms. Voters across the country have been energized by abortion rights and rising inflation. Check that you are registered to vote, that you are that your voter records are up to date. Though the rules differ by state, many states have voter registration deadlines up to 30 days prior to Election Day, which means registering before October 9th. In some states, you'll need a photo ID in order to register to vote and also present that ID when you cast your ballot. Most states allow you to vote in person during a designated early voting period, ranging from 3 to 46 days, though in some states, you may need to request a mail-in ballot to vote early. Once again, thank you all for joining us this evening, and a special thank you to experts for sharing information and helping our UFCW members get the facts They need to make an informed decision when voting in this 2022 midterm elections. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.
Came out in 1963 when A. Philip Randolph, a trade unionist, came forth to call for a march on Washington, asking for an end to Jim Crow laws, equal access to public education, and civil rights legislation that would change the face of a nation. Today we come before you, walking on the road to jobs, the road to peace, the road to justice, paved with the blood, the sweat, the tears of labor movement people from around the nation. And today, I come to you as a young person, as a young woman, as a young Black woman, to ask you to use us, use the young people of the United States of America to pave a road that will last forever, pave a road that will let us become the foot soldiers, let us not have to do this again for our children. We ask you to let us come forth with you, not behind you, not in front of you, but together on that road to jobs, justice, and peace.